As the chair of ASEAN this year, Cambodia will host the 21st Asean Summit later this November, in which a number of regional issues are going to be discussed and will be attended by world leaders, including the U.S. President Barack Obama. With me here is Ernie Bower, Chair of Southeast Asia Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies here in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Ernie, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, Cambodia has emphasized the narrowing between socioeconomic gaps between the ASEAN nations as one of its pillars as chair of ASEAN. How has Cambodia performed in that particular area so far, itself in terms of its development, as well as bridging that gap within ASEAN?
Well, I think first of all, it's appropriate for Cambodia, being one of the lesser developed and newer ASEAN members, to take up that issue. ASEAN will be stronger if the gap is narrowed between the most developed and the least developed ASEAN countries. So, good job for Cambodia to raise it. There's a lot of work to do there. Cambodia has, you asked the question, is Cambodia itself a paradigm of bridging that gap? And I think Cambodia has a lot to do in that area in terms of development, even development. And it's not easy, but I think it's very important. It's very important to the United States, too, that Cambodia, Laos, now Myanmar, that it's become a more active member in ASEAN. That gap is closed. It makes a stronger ASEAN, and a strong ASEAN is important to the United States.
In July, ASEAN foreign minister met in Cambodia. The meeting was criticized by some in the international community, basically saying that Cambodia didn't live up to it being a chair, and there were a lot of disagreements. Because of that, what does that basically mean for the ASEAN Summit at the end of this month?
Well, I think the meeting in July was China overplaying its hand. They put a lot of pressure on Cambodia. It was clear that Noor Hamtong, the foreign minister and deputy prime minister of Cambodia, sort of broke with ASEAN tradition. In fact, no joint statement came out of that meeting. And I think everybody felt, all the ASEAN ministers felt that China overplayed its hand. I think what we can expect in November is a more moderate position by China. I don't think they'll push Cambodia as hard. And I think the Chinese have realized that their very aggressive approach to ASEAN, trying to manipulate Cambodia to pull issues like South China Sea out of the discussion, is not going to be useful. So I think the Chinese will moderate their position at the leaders' meeting.
So now to relations with China.
Yes.
So it's still unclear whether the South China Sea will be on the agenda in this November summit. But back in July, as you know, there were a lot of disagreements regarding that topic, which sort of divided ASEAN.
Yeah.
And for the first time, the countries couldn't issue a joint statement. Now, where is China and ASEAN on this issue right now, and what can all the relevant parties do to avoid a repeat of what you have said in commentary, and I quote here, as a high-profile failure?
Yes. Well, look, I think the high-profile failure was a failure for China too. China overtly influenced Cambodia in July. The concept that we can't talk about, or we don't put on the record a discussion of the South China Sea, that thinking is really outdated. This sort of hide the important issue, don't talk about it. That's not the way governance works in the modern world, and that's not the way the China-ASEAN relationship would prosper. I think China has dialed it back, and I think they are going to. There probably is recognition among the Chinese that talking about the South China Sea is something that has to be done at the East Asia Summit. If the East Asia Summit won't talk about the most important security issues that involve the countries that are involved of the day, then it's not going to be relevant. It's not going to be a sustained leadership.
You told me earlier this year that you're pessimistic you are pessimistic about a code of conduct by November. So just quickly, where are you now?
Yeah, I think there's no chance that we'll have a code of conduct signed and done between ASEAN and China at the November conference. China right now is in the middle of its premier, most important political cycle. So you'll have a new Chinese leader coming to Cambodia, freshly minted, and I think the Chinese will probably try to sort of do no harm.
Where is the U.S. now on the South China Sea?
We don't have specific territorial or maritime claims in the South China Sea, but we want to see it resolved. Americans want to see it resolved according to a rule of law and in a way that no nation uses its economic or political power to bully or force or coerce smaller nations on sovereign issues.
I think you've expressed frustration. I saw on Twitter that Cambodia might not produce as substantive an agenda. What did you mean? But is that?
Yeah, I mean, I had high expectations for Cambodia. I thought that my analysis was that Hun Sen is a cagey leader, smart guy. I thought that he would use the world spotlight in Cambodia's chairmanship to show that while he's certainly working with the Chinese, he also wants balance in his foreign policy. Let's see. I mean, I think November, we'll see how he plays his cards. But I think it's good for Cambodia to have a balanced foreign policy. This balance doesn't mean balancing the United States and China, but it means working with all players and a recognition that ASEAN is very important. I don't think that recognition came through in July. So Cambodia has an opportunity, Hun Sen has an opportunity in November to make that point.
What is your view on U.S. engagement in Southeast Asia?
There'll be a high level of continuity in terms of the strategy. The strategy being that long-term American interests in the Asia-Pacific, or the Indo-Pacific, as I think the Indians would prefer us to call it, are tied up with deep engagement with ASEAN. So I think there's an understanding it's a bipartisan understanding in this town that good relationships with the rest of Asia, particularly ASEAN and our allies in the region, is the way to deal with an emerging China. On trade, I think this has been a missing, or let's say a lagging factor in Obama's foreign policy and his pivot to Asia. I don't think we've done enough on trade under the first Obama administration, but I think that a second Obama administration would be more forward-leaning on trade.
So you basically answered part of my last question,
okay,
which is about that and about U.S.-Cambodia relations. How do you see U.S.-Cambodia relations, evolve? Actually, Foreign Minister Hong, when he was visiting Washington and he was talking at CSIS, he mentioned that he hoped to see increased trade within the U.S. and Cambodia. Now, given the global economic circumstances, how do you see that happening in the specific case of Cambodia?
Yeah, I'm a real optimist about the future of U.S.-Cambodia relations. I think that I still believe that Hun Sen and the Cambodian people have a big interest in working with the United States, no matter what happened in July. I think spending time in Cambodia, I see a lot of opportunities for the business sector. U.S.-Cambodia trade and investment is doing well and can do so much better. I think in terms of foreign policy, the Americans are realizing that to be effective in Asia, we have to know every country in a much more granular way, including some of the smaller countries like Cambodia. And I think we're going to put more investment in understanding Cambodia, knowing Cambodia better. The other hand has to shake too, so I think Hun Sen would be wise, or the Cambodian government would be wise, to work with the Americans and do more on security, on trade, on people-to-people ties, on education. It's all good for Cambodians. It's all good for Americans. So I'm very optimistic. The fly in the ointment would be major human rights abuses or other things like this. But I think in a good relationship, you're able to sit down with a colleague on the other side of the table and say, these are the problems that we have with what's happening with you. You know, let's talk about them. And if Cambodia is willing to have those discussions with the United States, they have issues that they want to see us do better on in terms of things like debt and some other issues, we'll have a good relationship in the future.
On that note, thank you very much, Ernie Bower, for I really appreciate the time for talking to VOA.
It's my great pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.